Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum, namaste, Sat Sri Akal. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the Azeeza show. Today we're actually going to be talking about accessibility and the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is coming up in a couple of weeks or less. And with me today are my guests Sukaina, Dada and Rabia, Khedr. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
That's great. So we wanted to just jump right into this. So please tell us about yourselves and who you are and what you do. We'd love to hear that.
Okay, I guess I'll start. My
Sure.
name is Sukaina. I am currently a PhD student at York University in the Critical Disability Studies program. My research is on actually refugees with disabilities. And I am the founder and a director of Smile Canada Support Services, which is an organization that supports kids with disabilities. I'm primarily from the various Muslim communities in Canada. And what got me into all of this? Well, many years ago, my little cousin, a very close person to me, had just moved to Canada from Tanzania. And the reason why he moved to Canada was for supports and services for his family to get him to go to school and to just be part of different things. In Tanzania, he was not going to school, not really leaving the house actually. And so when he got here, we quickly realized that it was difficult for them to access any kind of support or services. It was just really hard to navigate the system, and it was just as hard to be part of their respective community. So a bunch of us, we had an idea to just start an organization that specifically focused on children. And at the time, I was doing my master's in occupational therapy. And so I decided to do a study around access, particularly for Muslim families with children with disabilities. And it just led to some startling conclusions, which led to Smile, which fast forward 10 years, here we are.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Rabia?
Well, my journey is slightly different because I live with a disability and I have siblings with disabilities, so it's been a lifetime of experiences. I met some friends in the mainstream disability rights community, and particularly with Ethno-Racial People with Disabilities Coalition of Ontario. A number of us were involved there that represented various Muslim communities and had a range of disability experiences. We came together and we thought about doing work within our community. So around 2004, we started to do some research, and we got a grant from the Olive Tree Foundation to actually conduct focus groups and interviews and whatnot. And we published our Toward an Inclusive Ummah Muslims with Disabilities Speak Out report in 2007. Which then led us down a path of trying to build capacity in the community to respond to the needs that were identified, and ultimately evolved into us establishing a direct service agency known as Deen Support Services, and Deen stands for Disability Empowerment Equality Network, and the purchase of a property in partnership with Ansar Cooperative Housing Corporation on South Down Road in Mississauga, known as the Muniba Center, where we offer a number of programs and services, and we are growing and expanding fairly quickly to serve the community's needs. And coming fast forward, just today, hot off the press, which will become public in a couple of weeks officially, is that we secured a grant from Olive Tree Foundation again to do a comprehensive research survey of the needs of Muslims and Muslim families living with disabilities.
Right. Okay, wonderful.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think it'll be public very soon.
That's wonderful. So here's a question. So I want the audience to really understand, what are some of the challenges that people face. Sukaina, you mentioned, that it was hard to access, or for example, your little cousin wasn't able to go to school, but that was in Tanzania. What are some of the challenges, for example, that, and Rabia, please jump in, that people are facing here?
Well, a range of challenges. Access to services, there are wait lists, there are gaps, there's lack of cultural awareness and cultural responsiveness when it comes to many services.
Right.
People don't know how to navigate the system, which Sukaina mentioned already, you know, especially when they're newcomers and especially when parents are caregivers.
Right.
You know, they really are struggling with their caregiver responsibilities. And there are huge gaps when it comes to peer support, whether for families or individuals with specific disabilities. So we have a number of programs and services that provide that kind of support.
Right.
We have a virtual support group for people with vision loss. We have our mobility network. We have a family network.
Right.
So there are a number of initiatives just to even fill that void of peer support, of people coming together and being able to share their experiences.
Wonderful. And what about you, Sukaina?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, we have over 150 families registered with SMILE, and amongst those, I believe about 26 Syrian newcomers. And, you know, people are having a really difficult time, not only navigating the system, but really even just, you know, being in some ways forced or persuaded into, you know, going in a direction that they don't necessarily want to go in.
Right.
For example, with the individualized education plans that students with disabilities have in schools, many of the families don't understand, you know, what it is that they're signing on to, don't know their rights, for example, don't know the rights around inclusion and the rights around access, and also their right to deny and, you know, to just say no, it's not for them.
Right.
And so this is something that we've heard from over and over again. You know, the other thing, which I think many individuals are struggling with, is access in Islamic schools, being able to attend, being able to have an education, whether it's in, you know, a private school or even attending a private Saturday school.
Right.
By and large, children and their families are just not included.
And that's been historic. Like from day one, we've never had access to learning and experiencing Islam. People who have vision loss, have autism, have learning difficulties, have hearing loss. I mean, when we did our Toward an Inclusive Ummah report, one of the most moving statements we had was from a gentleman who was deaf, and he said he would sit in the front row to try to lip read the Friday prayer sermon or khutbah, and how challenging it was. And today he was learning from his hearing child. When his hearing child was attending a madrasa program or an Islamic school Sunday program, he was learning Islam through his child.
Wow.
And there are some great initiatives. I mean, we spoke about the organizations that we're representing, but for example, a Global Deaf Muslim Canada, there's a Global Deaf Muslim around the world, and then Global Deaf Muslim Canada. Like, they're really working with Islamic schools and mosques and centers to ensure that there are services for everyone.
Right.
But we have a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know one of our friends wasn't able to join us today for this interview. Harvinder Bajwa also runs an organization called the Canadian South Asian Supporting Independent Living. And one of the things that they often talk about, I've had the pleasure of kind of working with them in different ways just to support. And one of the things that she often talks about is the fact that, independence isn't necessarily about taking people away from their families, but it's also a way, there's also places and ways in which we can empower people with disabilities to stay within their extended family, still have that relationship, and still, be empowered, right? And to have, and have a voice. So how do you feel about that?
Well, that's the concept of interdependency, right? And in the dominant culture in mainstream society, the idea is you're 18, you're out. That's been, today it may not be economically feasible, that's a whole other ballgame. But historically, it has been the fact that, you're an adult, you're out. And that's been the perspective even in terms of people with disabilities, that, and this is what I found when I started to do more and more work, given the fact that my brothers had global developmental delay. And as they became adults and left the school system, which is a huge pressure point in the system and for families, and there's a tremendous gap in wait lists, most parents were looking for residential homes.
Right.
My parents weren't looking for residential homes. None of our parents were looking for residential homes for their adult children with autism or global developmental delay, etc. They were looking for programs and services to support them in maintaining a quality of life and a quality of care for their family members in their own existing home, in that extended family environment. And so, you know, that's again the gap between access to services and services that are culturally responsive to the needs of our changing demographics.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And just a question around, you know, we talked a little bit about, well, I guess what comes to mind for me is that, you know, there's sort of supporting people with their extent, but even still, I've heard a lot of stories, you know, about people who are neglected in their family homes, or they're dealing with some sort of abuse, be it financial or physical, that type of thing. So is that something that you've come across? Is that something that you know, that you work on as an issue as well?
Yes, you know, many times actually, and it's you know, we've seen different types of abuse, whether it's physical or you know, verbal, emotional, psychological, financial, both sometimes from within, you know, families, even if it's like an extended family. We've seen that. We've seen abuse coming from different community members, you know, and you know, we've seen neglect. And I think, like, as a, you know, as a community, or as different communities, part of a bigger community, we have to address all of it.
Right.
And we have to, you know, do it in a way that is responsive to people's actual needs.
Right.
And not just in a way that we're assuming is.
For sure. So we need to take a quick break, and then we'll be back. We'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, welcome back. You're watching the Azeeza Show, and with me today is our guests Sukaina and Rabia. So we were just talking about, you know, some of the challenges that people with disabilities face, and how we can, you know, work towards making the world more accessible. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about was, you know, some of the challenges, like we were just talking, Sukaina, before the break, about, you know, neglect in the family. I know in my conversations with, you know, for example, I was speaking earlier about one of our friends, Harvinder, and others within, you know, Rabia, we've had this conversation too, right? It's like, how do we, you know, support, you know, there's this, in some ways we would say a misconception that, you know, people, particularly, you know, women, you know, with a disability aren't really, you know, quote, marriage material, or that, you know, they should just remain at home and not even consider that as an option. What do you say to that?
That's a huge, you know, it's a cultural thing, right? People still view people with disabilities as, you know, something defective or deficient. And as we've always said, we say, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates, you know, in His glory, He creates everybody perfect. There's no imperfection, there's no defect. We just are the way we are. And, however, unfortunately, within various cultural traditions, there's all kinds of perceptions and perspectives, and, you know, come on, we racialize. So, you know, we judge people on shadism. So given that, are we really going to accept someone who has a disability, whether physical or intellectual or learning difficulty or mental health issue or sensory disability? It's again, people's perceptions that you know, a person with a disability is a disabled person, and what are they going to be capable of? And of course, the biggest, you know, like when I got married, for example, everybody thought I was marrying somebody with a disability, or he didn't know.
Or he didn't know.
Like, yeah, our house is a secret. Yeah,
That's
you know.
terrible.
So, but this is epidemic, right? Like, if you don't fit the stereotypical mold of what within Eastern and Southern traditions is embodiment of an ideal woman, right? And that goes with all kinds of formats. Women with disabilities don't fit that mold, and so it's very difficult. There are so many wonderful, well-accomplished, strong women out there who are not getting married because of this expectation that they should be marrying somebody disabled. And really that expectation is unfortunate, because you don't want people with disabilities to double their barriers. They already have enough of them. I mean, where people choose, like deaf people choose to marry deaf people because of communication.
Right.
They speak the same language.
Right.
In some cases, a blind person marries another blind person, but that's not the default. And the expectation shouldn't be that it should be the default.
For sure. What do you think, Sukaina?
Yeah, I mean, I think this issue is across the lifespan. There's this assumption that children with disabilities, aren't going to do well in school, and then as youth get older, that they're asexual, and then as that they're not going to contribute to society and not going to, be able to get meaningful occupations. Like this is an issue from when kids are born until the very end of life, and this. These stereotypes, like, they need to stop. Just like we're trying to eliminate racism and Islamophobia, we have to eliminate ableism. This idea that people with disabilities are lesser. I was actually thinking about this on my way here. That it's 2018, and even here in Canada, like I was reading a report, Minister Ahmed Hussein, in April, he was talking about Canada, revisiting Canada's immigration policy around people with disabilities, because it is very discriminatory.
Right.
So I think that, I think that we have to really just examine this from a rights perspective, that women with disabilities have the right to get married or not get married, have the right to bear children or not. But instead what we do is we just say, okay, no, these people have rights and these people don't. And, it's high time that we get over that. And I know it's easier said than done, but collectively, solidarity across movements, across organizations, just coming together in forums just like this.
And actually, Sukaina brings an interesting point. What's ending up happening is, this idea that people with disabilities don't have this desire to get married, to raise families, then services have been designed for the individual. So they don't necessarily accommodate the notion of a family. When we did our research so many years ago, we had a woman who acquired a physical disability, who had a very large family. And because she needed an accessible home, her family was split between 2 units, which is unheard of.
That's unheard.
Her children, she was a single mom, her children had to live on their own. The older kids were on their own in one townhome, and she was with the younger children in the other townhome.
That's ridiculous.
That is absolutely ridiculous. And this is a woman who had the confidence, who had the language skills, who could advocate for herself, and yet this is how she was forced to live.
See, that's so interesting. See, I also heard of a story where this young woman who, had a physical disability, was walking with a walker. Her parents refused for her to marry this guy who was able-bodied, and so she ended up running away with him. And so it was like, well, like, really, was that necessary? So now she's isolated. Hopefully, this individual is going to treat her well, but there's that risk, right? That you run with something like that just because somebody else in the family doesn't feel that that's appropriate, right? Well, who are we to decide that, So
it's
true.
Even, some people that you and I both know, when they've had children, being told that, oh, you should really consider your options because it's not medically safe for you to bear children when there's no medical reason. So again, it's throughout the system, the ableist ideology prevails, and people with disabilities, the expectations of them wanting to live a full, contributing and valued quality of life is really compromised at various levels throughout the life cycle, as Sukaina was saying.
For sure. Well, I wanted to switch gears a bit. Now, there is this International Day of Persons with Disabilities coming up, and our show is pretty well close to that date. So just wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about this date and like how people acknowledge or celebrate it, like what happens?
Yeah, so it's a day of celebration. It's a day where we're really trying to raise awareness. So Smile Canada, we have a few things up our sleeves to try and do that. We have some online campaigns just on sharing some of the stories of families and sharing some of their experiences in the hopes that we will just help people understand that there's not always one perspective on things, and so that's in the works. And we have an event where so Smile has a monthly event, and during these monthly events, kids just get together and honestly just have a good time. And we ask families to bring their child's friends and their neighbors, their relatives, what have you, and just getting together and just celebrating this day. This is really important, and it's important for us to talk about disability, and we talk about disability and intersectionality and talking to people about how we're facing challenges in many different ways. But not only are we facing challenges, we're addressing them, whether it's individually or collectively, and then we're celebrating those, because we need to. We've come a long way. Like I said, we have a long way to go, but also just celebrating people.
For sure. Wonderful.
So we have, again, our annual Disability Khutbah campaign. This year it's dedicated, we're asking imams and khatibs to dedicate their sermons to disability at Friday prayers on Friday, December the 7th. But between December 1st and December 8th, we have a number of events going on, including we're out doing some outreach to take a multi-faith approach to acknowledging the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So we're asking some of our interfaith friends to also address the topic of disability within their spaces and places of worship.
For sure. And khutbah, it's like a Friday prayer,
yes,
and at the mosque.
Again, it's to raise awareness, and this is something we've been doing for a number of years now. Since about 2009, actually.
That's great.
On December 2nd, so December 3rd is the actual day. On December 2nd, we're having our annual brunch in the morning. And there will be an activity in Scarborough as well, and in Ottawa. In Scarborough, it'll be a celebration. Collaborative celebration, cake cutting. In Ottawa, there will be a similar event with families. Our event in Mississauga, our weekly drop-in program that runs Sunday afternoons, that group will do their own little activity within the program to commemorate the day, and so will with our day program folks. And finally, we will top it off with our annual Imams Charity Game, second annual.
Great.
That's a very exciting event.
Is
I've
it?
heard about that.
Okay, cool. Well, I know that Harvinder had also said that her organization, CSASL, or Canadian South Asian Supporting Independent Living, is having their gala as well, and that's going to happen on December the 1st, and this is the same thing. We actually have a woman who, by the name of Priyanka Shit. She's a director, she's a unit director at Sistering, one of the women's shelters, and so she's going to do the keynote address and speak about her story as well as an individual with disability, so that should be interesting.
Very cool. If I can, just for all the viewers out there, take a look at the IPDP website. There's a lot of great ideas that you could do, whether with your family, activities you can do, ways you can support, ways you can celebrate. Whether it's individually or collectively. There's a lot of things happening. It's also very cool to take a look at what people are doing in different countries. Because it's really neat to see the different cultures and different ways that people are celebrating this day.
Excellent. Well, we've got about 60 seconds left. Do you guys have any last minute thoughts for the viewers?
Well, just my thought would be reach out, connect people. There are a number of opportunities, programs and services available through Deen Support Services. Check out our website, like our social media, and just connect with us. And if you know people, please connect them to us, because sometimes people just need that little nudge to make that contact.
Sounds good.
Smile Canada Support Services. If you just look us up, we'd love to hear from you. I completely agree with Rabia here. Sometimes people just need that nudge, and it makes all the difference.
Well, thank you again for watching, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.